We just wanted to say a big thank you to everybody this year. This is, as you know, our last meeting of 2015. So we just want to say thank you to everybody who gave a presentation this year. As soon as Mr. Killingbeck. Okay, so here's our list of speakers this year. And what's really awesome is there's a lot of new people. So thank you for doing that. I mean, I don't have to read these to you, but you know, if anybody has interest for presenting in 2016, we're obviously always looking for new people to speak. Let us know. So yeah, thank you for a good 2015. And then the next one more slide. Yep, so here's a list of all of our hosts for this year too. Big thank you to the hosts. I would like to give a little and obviously RBA, big thank you to them for being a awesome sponsor of the group. So yeah, thanks for making 2015 awesome.
Cool, thank you.
And then last one, so Xamarin actually reached out to the community organizer or the other group organizers recently and said that they are looking to do an all things Xamarin meeting. And they wanted to try to get the meetings in December or January. And since we take December off, you know, this meeting would be held in January. There'll be more swag, so if you don't have a monkey, which I don't know who in the hell in this room doesn't have a monkey, but if you need a monkey, they'll probably give us more monkeys. There will also be a complimentary Xamarin subscription raffled off, so you may win a business license, which should be pretty sweet. And then we're obviously going to cover all of the new Xamarin 4 announcements that were just made, and Xamarin's going to buy us a Xamarin cake.
Yeah. So make sure you come January.
Yeah, tell your friends.
Because you might win a $1,000 subscription.
And then you better odds of winning the raffle.
Yep. Cool. Let's see, what else?
I think that's it. Anything else?
Anybody have anything they want to throw out there before we start our awesome presentation by Mr. Frank?
All right.
All right, well, let's get this party started.
All right.
So the first thing they teach you when you're going to do presentations is don't do anything for the first time. This is going to be for the first time. I'm using Steve's pretty cool rig. Tom, did you use this at yours?
What's that?
It goes in, so anyway, Steve will probably explain it better, but we'll be able to see my iPod up on the screen.
We're switching it up.
So I've been coming to this for 2 years. One of the best user groups here in the Twin Cities, I think, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here. I go to a couple of other ones regularly. This one is the most intriguing with really good speakers. So thanks you guys for putting it together. I know it takes work. I know how hard it is to do this kind of stuff. So, and we're getting better every day. Am I up? Go to my laptop.
Okay. All right.
And so I started playing with this pretty hardcore back in February, and like I put in my little blurb, I don't know why, but I really think this is fun. I've been a developer since C# was out in beta in whatever year that was, 2001. And this to me is more fun than even writing the mobile apps, believe it or not, to me. So one of the reasons, I'm kind of rambling on just like in my presentation. Oh, here we go. All right. So I thought it'd be good, now that I've got 9 months of actual working on 3 real world apps, I wanted to take you through some of the tips and tricks, some of the things I ran into, some of the things I wasn't able to find. I've gotten so used to going to Google and typing in a question and having 3,000 answers come up, and not having that in this because it's so new, saying how do I do this? And it's crickets, and then you reach out to Xamarin, hey, am I doing something wrong? Why is this not working? And getting crickets from them too was new to me. I'm not used to that. So again, that's fun to me for some reason. I like pain, I like torture for some reason. So thought I'd at least make it worth your while to come in for an hour and at least, if nothing else, learn a couple of things that took me forever to figure out. I'm going to give you one at the very end that I guarantee, because I even tried looking for it again today and couldn't find it. Something that took me forever to try to find online. So I'm giving you that one for free tonight. So, an overview of the Xamarin UITest. Who's played with it? Who's just fired it up and just kind of screwed around with it? Has anyone taken the Xamarin University course? Both of them? There was the setup one, and then there was the get dive in and do it. So the REPL command, Steve, I know you are using this heavily, right? Tom, you said you are, a couple other people. Please don't be shy. These are my opinions. Like I said, there are no books to read on this yet. There are no best practices I could find. I made up most of this myself using a developer background. I'm not the best developer in the world, so please don't be shy. If you have found a better way to do something, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. I'm doing this for a living now. I've created a company and this is what I'm gonna focus on. So I wanna get very, very good at it, and the only way to do that is to accept advice and help. So please don't be shy. Steve, especially you, I was really hoping you're gonna say, oh, do that way. I would love to hear that, so please don't be shy. These are my opinions and recommendations. I'm not married to them by any means. If you took the Xamarin University course, and if you do have that subscription, take it. It's a 2-hour one, it's pretty easy, or even just watch the videos. Download the sample, because what it does is it gives you a really nice basic framework that I'm using over and over again for my projects to start with. And so in a really cheesy UML type diagram, what the projects end up being is you have an interface, not a UI, but an actual C# interface that defines all your tests. And we'll see my real world example when we get into the code. Now that's where you can go and look very quickly. Here are all the tests I have created already. So login, move through screen 1 to screen 2, add a vehicle, things like that would be defined in this interface. Inside of a shared project, not a PCL, but a shared project, I have an abstract class where I put any kind of shared UI, where both iOS and Android, the commands to move around the UI are exactly the same. And then I have 2 specific projects, one for Android and one for iOS, that are where I put any of the commands that only work on one platform or the other. I was amazed at how little I was able to share between platforms, even in Xamarin.Forms. That shocked me. I'll get into that in a little bit. And then, so this is where all of your Xamarin UI stuff goes. But back here, you have NUnit. This all runs under the NUnit framework. Anything that runs NUnit can run these. So we're starting to get into getting this into our continuous integration, running these tests. I have a goal where I'm at right now. I want to put a Mac Mini hanging off our continuous integration build and have a couple of real devices hanging off of that and running. Now I know, Steve, you guys tried this, and I asked Ben the other day, he said you ran into some problems with iOS, so you didn't quite get that working. But I have high hopes that somehow between you and I we'll figure it out. Is that true? Ben said you got close, but you can't do real builds, run it on real hardware, hanging off of a Mac Mini.
For the UI testing.
For the UI testing.
We have Android automated UI testing on for continuous integration, but not iOS.
But not iOS. And the reason is you cannot automatically install apps on iOS yet. And that's what I've read. And I wanted to ask, that's what I've run into so far, and it doesn't sound like there was a way around it yet. Now with the new, I went to Code Camp in October, and there was a guy that went in and talked about the new recording that's in Xcode. I don't know if anyone's played with that, but you fire it up, you move through your app, and it's recording, it's even writing little lines of code that runs through the UI. I'm hoping that as Apple gets more and more into that, they'll start realizing in an enterprise you're going to need to have some kind of continuous integration. Hence, let me somehow sideload an app onto the device programmatically, but we'll see. Any questions on a high level of what we would look at? It's NUnit, and when we get into it, you'll see that there's really nothing different.
Frank, can you quick turn off your internal microphone on your computer? I'm getting an extra audio source there. So just go to your system preference and go to audio. And go to sound of the speaker and go to input and turn that off. Just slide the volume all the way to the left. There you go. Great, thank you.
Okay. in the real world, since February, I've worked on a Titanium app and wrote some UI tests against a Accelerator Titanium app. I wrote some tests against an Android Xamarin native app, native in Xamarin, so it's written in Xamarin, but the native. And then I'm currently working against Xamarin.Forms. So out of those three, Accelerator Titanium, Xamarin Android, Xamarin.Forms, which do you think is the easiest one to run against, to write tests against? Titanium, Xamarin Android, Xamarin.Forms.
Xamarin.Forms.
Titanium. Titanium. Xamarin.Forms has been difficult, very difficult. And so the examples I'm going to give are almost all in Xamarin.Forms. I'm going to go through exactly why and what I've run into. I was shocked. I did not expect to run into that much with Xamarin.Forms. And it's not Xamarin's fault per se. There's a little bit of overpromising on their part. It's still new, but you're fighting the platforms as well. You've got an abstraction on top of what you might consider an abstraction. There's a lot of layers in between. So when you set an ID in your code, there's a lot of ways for that ID to get lost into the events that are firing in the background on the platforms. So Xamarin.Forms, very surprisingly, is not that easy to write tests against. When we get into the code, you'll see some of these things. You'll see compiler directives all over the place. You'll even see them. They've snuck into my code that's shared that's exactly the same on the platforms. And I just realized that the other day when I was putting this presentation together. I've gotten a little sloppy. So I'm going to go back and refactor, which brings me to the last bullet point. It is a never-ending iteration. Every single day I go back and touch tests that were working just fine 2 weeks ago and either don't work at all now or they're doing something odd. They work sometimes or not. The dev team is not changing the app. It's just the way it is. And I have a lot of examples for that too. For example, the app I show you at Polaris, you can add vehicles to your garage. Well, when you add and remove, they're soft deleted. So when the app calls out and says, get me all your vehicles, it gets all 1,000 of my vehicles now because my automated tests enter vehicles every time they run. Yet, I'm only showing 3 or 4 to the screen. So I'm starting to uncover what might hit somebody 5 years from now. You might end up with 100 vehicles in your garage. But those are the kind of things that, unless you're expecting them, but how could you, you're going to have to go back and start messing around with your tests. Never-ending iteration. Don't worry about it. It's just the way it is. The platform-specific UI interaction, my philosophy on that is supposed to get the UI from where it is right this second to where you want it to go, and that's it. Don't do assertions in there. Don't do testing in there. Don't look. It should say, I want to log in. So in order to log into the app, I want the app to launch. I want to look for the login button. I want to press the login button. I want to enter username and password. I want to hit submit. Done. That's what your UI-specific code should do. It shouldn't say, did the login succeed? Am I looking for this up in the corner? Those are done outside in your assertions. So, and that's a key point because, like I said, I've gotten a little sloppy and let some things slip in where they shouldn't. But as you'll see as we start getting into the code, these aren't unit tests. Even though it's running under NUnit, these are full integration tests. They get messy. They get confusing. Comment well. It still doesn't matter. You're doing a lot of things. Try to keep your code as simple as you can and as compartmentalized as you can, because nothing's going to be stopping you from letting these things slide in. I mentioned Xamarin.Forms difficulty, and it really comes down to these two things that are hitting me on the project right now. When I took the course, I remember the instructor saying, you will be able to set, and it'll end up coming through as a style ID, you will be able to set an ID on every single control. If you don't, we want you to call Xamarin and tell us. Well, if you go on their forums and you see me, you'll see where I'm saying, why isn't it there? Why isn't it there? Why isn't it there? And I keep getting different answers as to why it's there. Unfortunately, you can't always set IDs on controls, even in obvious places where you'd say, why is this ID? I'm not doing anything fancy. I get it, I'm dynamically adding controls. I get it, I have this custom renderer that's doing weird stuff, but this is a basic Xamarin.Forms control that you guys gave me. I'm setting the ID, it's not being set, what's the deal? The answer I got from support was, if it doesn't inherit from visual element, all bets are off. Most things do, some things don't. So far, that's been true, so if you're wondering what you can and can't set IDs to, and you're setting one and it's not getting passed through, if it inherits from visual element, I haven't seen it where it hasn't, but a lot of ours that we're using don't. So I've had to go around and around trying to get something other than looking for text on a button that's going to change when we go multilingual. And we're using MVVM cross sort of, but the dev team wrote their own little thing underneath. So we're using binding everywhere. Inversion of control and do bindings underneath. I can't do inversion of control in the UI test. I need the real data. I need to be hooked to the database for a bunch of different reasons. So this binding of data, a lot of times I need that value in the binding if I were going to set something to the ID, but it's not there. I can't get at it. By the time the binding happens, the control has gone up the stack enough where even if I set an ID, it's not there. It's null still. So these two things are why the Xamarin.Forms have been very, very difficult for me. It's been more difficult than I would have expected, and a lot of the hoops I have to run through are because of these two simple things. Any questions so far? Anything I've said that shocked you? Anything I've said that sounds dumb?
What are they using that doesn't inherit visual elements? Do you know what
kind of control do you have that you?
I could pull, afterwards, I'll pull up some of our code,
Okay.
and I can show you what the development team, because when you see the UI, this one's a little crazy for me too. I'll show you some of the examples of where we're inheriting from things where I would certainly, it's going to the screen. To me, that's a visual element, come on.
Right.
You know, what's going on? Now, if you took the course and you saw how it goes, you have to add an event handler in your main method. That's what fires, and then it says, hey, if this thing fires and you're setting an ID, set the style ID for the platform that you're on. That event doesn't always fire. The other thing I got from support while I was asking that first question is, hey, when the automation ID becomes available, then everything will get an ID and your problems will be solved. I said, oh, what is automation ID? When's that going to be available? Crickets. And that was in September. And I asked again, hey, I'd really love to hear when this automation ID, what's the deal with this, where's it coming? And I got no answer again. So either that person said something they shouldn't have, it's coming soon, or it got abandoned, or whatever happened. But supposedly there was this magical automation ID, because style ID is not meant to have unique IDs. Xamarin just made that up. So I don't know what automation ID, I didn't look in Xamarin 4, is that there?
Haven't heard about it.
Yeah. So it's either coming soon, hopefully, or the guy was full of it, trying to make it go away. Was there another question, or?
I was planning to ask you, like, did you do like mock objects or something for data, but you said that you're not doing that. I was surprised to hear that.
These aren't unit tests. These aren't. When I looked at it, the actual app, I'm partially testing the back end. I'm testing connectivity. I'm testing the speed. Like I gave the example, someone might have 30 vehicles, because you don't just have Polaris vehicles, you could put your lawnmower in there and keep track of its maintenance records. So in the grand scheme of things, I thought it'd be better not to do that, to test the connectivity. Plus our app is meant to be disconnected and run out in the woods while you're riding your snowmobile. So I wanted to be able to test that as well. Without faking anything out underneath, I might have fixed something that was broken in the real. Does that make sense?
Do you start with like an empty database and then
No.
UI test, add all the data, and then?
They keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any environment today where I can hit a button and say refresh yourself, reset yourself. That's why I have over 1,000 vehicles in my garage from all the tests I've run.
Have you tried their test recorder yet?
The what?
The test recorder that came out with Xamarin 4, they released a preview for it.
I did not,
Okay.
because I had saw what the Xcode recorder was,
Yeah.
and from what I saw, that's really what they were doing.
Yeah.
So as I get into the real examples that we're going to do next, I'll show you all the things I had to do, and at the end, I would really love to hear, you know what, I think a recorder would have worked better than what I ended up with, or, okay, I kind of see what you ran into, and I don't know how a recorder would have gotten through some of these
Yeah,
things.
well, that's what I was wondering, is not so much if the recorder is useful or not, but I just wonder how it would pick out those elements that don't have IDs when you click on them, how it would write the code of the recorder.
Well,
It would just break, because it does just break a lot.
Yeah.
It's a review, but
so there's a command you can run, and I'll do it when we get the code up so you can see it if you haven't yet. It's called REPL, R-E-P-L. And you can do it, you just put it right in the middle, and as the app's running, it'll launch your terminal. And then you have some commands you can run, and it's showing you a DOM object in a web. I don't know what the real thing is for a mobile app, but it's showing you this is what the mobile app's putting to the screen. Now the cool thing that, how they make this work, every phone has to be handicap accessible. So if you're blind, it needs to be able to talk to a reader, screen reader. Well, they're hooking into those same hooks that those readers, the Braille readers, the screen readers, they're hooking into that on these phones, which I thought was pretty ingenious. It's there already, they have to be by law, the Accessibility Act of 1992. So you have to do this if you're a phone manufacturer, and that's what they're hooking into. So when you run the REPL command, you'll say, find me login, the word login.
yeah.
It'll first start and look and say, okay, there are certain IDs. Is there something called login? No. All right, now let's go look for the text login. The first one I find, I'm going to take it. If you have the word login colon, then a button, and in the hierarchy, it sees that first, it's going to grab that label and press it, which probably does nothing.
Well, actually, the test recorder, because I played around with it, I have an app that has like no IDs on anything. It doesn't use MEVM cross, and the way it did it is it would just say, if I click the button on the middle of the app, it would say click the second UI button. It would actually use an index. So
And, yep, and you can do that. And I'll show where some of the controls in our app, I have no ID, and it's a hierarchy, it's a tabs. So I have to say, go to tab index 3.
Okay.
It's a zero index array. Go to this type of control,
Yeah.
index 3.
Okay.
And hopefully there's never a second tab bar or one that goes above it, because I'll start pressing that one instead. So very similar, yeah, it's the same thing. And remember, you're in C#, so once you're in the C# world, you got Rage, you got everything. Okay, so I've been at Polaris since they brought me in the beginning part of October to come in and just get their QA team off the ground with UITests. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to leave. It's one of those things, because you could write these forever and just keep writing and writing and writing tests, and they love them. I've already found a few bugs that would have slipped right through anybody testing. The vehicle list is an example of one, but even simple things, found a couple misspelled words because I was keying off of things. So I was able to prove the value of this. The tests, I have 9 UI tests, and then I've even gotten into one that is calling the services directly to add things. Then I take the mobile app, cause it to sync, then I check the mobile app, then I remove it through the services, then I check the mobile app again. And that's the final example I'll show. That's the crazy one. It took me about a week. But I've got 10 tests in. I've been there for about 5 weeks. Just to give you an idea, and it's all my tests fully run on Android and iOS. So for every test, so those 10, I've actually really had to write 2 completely different UI drivers for that. So 20 tests in roughly 20 days. If you're thinking of, once you get familiar with it and you get rolling, they average about 1 platform test per day for anyone that's budgeting or thinking how long these take. Now these are pretty bulletproof. I had the initial test runs done in a few days. It was very easy, but hardening the tests is the hardest part. So some of the challenges, I should, yeah, I'll go through this, then I'll show you the app, just so you understand what I'm doing, and then we'll get into the testing. So I'm at Polaris. This is meant for, you've bought a Polaris snowmobile, an ATV. This app, it has a map, so as you're driving around in the woods, you can see where you are, you can set waypoints, you can, heavy map use. They chose an API called Scobbler. I don't know if anyone's worked with the Scobbler map. It's got its good points, it's got its bad, but that's been a challenge. Offline syncing, so everything you do, you could be in the middle of the woods, take a picture, say I was at this waypoint on the map, but I'm 100 miles from the nearest cell phone tower. So somewhere down the line, please make sure this syncs up to the server so that I can see it on the website. It's using Xamarin.Forms, which is the ID things that I got into that were a challenge. But by far, the biggest thing that nailed me, and luckily, I always do my stuff on hardware, both development and testing. I did not do it on the simulators to start, is there's no way to log out of the app once you're logged in. I would have never, ever thought that that would present such a challenge to what I'm doing, and all the little hoops I had to run through, and all the things I had to do to make sure that when I log, there's no way to log out of the app. Can we switch? When you first log in, the login is nothing special. Put in a username and password, you get in or you don't. You first come, you always, when the app comes out of the background, or you first log in, you always end up on this map page. You can see we've got some eyes all over the place. Those are things that someone else has added to the map, informational. So snowmobile clubs, ATV clubs feed their trail data into Polaris. This is one of the main reasons Polaris' app's so popular, is they have the most comprehensive map. If we start to zoom in, all those lines are all of the trails in Minnesota, and it's all over the United States. Which state has more snowmobile trails? Alaska or, let me think. Which state has more trails, Alaska or Alabama?
Alabama.
It's Alabama. My joke is because Alaska's just go. Yeah. There's no trails, drive into the woods. You know, there's no need. Yeah, Alabama's got all kinds of trails, and Alaska is almost none. But you can see Minnesota. This mapping thing, I don't do much testing in here. I really don't know how I would. I don't know what I would say, is this trail drawn right? I mean, we have a whole ArcGIS team that all their job is to sit and draw these maps and make sure they're accurate. They zoom down in and they look for a satellite and they look for the trail and make sure the line's within 10 feet of where it is. But it does capture, we're right roughly there in the middle as I zoom in. I can set waypoints like, hey, I'm here and let's take a picture and save it and move around the map. I can record things. So I have 168 different waypoints that I've added. That's starting to cause a performance problem. I've tracked a ride when I drove here from Polaris to here. There'll be a line on the map if I zoomed in enough to show me. So it's keeping track of that. So GPS type stuff. Again, not a lot I can test. It's this thing sitting on my desk at work when I'm running these tests. So track a ride where you went 3 inches. What happened?
It's because you rotated it.
Oh.
Hold on a second. There you go. Go ahead.
You can add waypoints, track the rides. These things get synced if I'm connected. If not, it does they call fire and forget, where try to connect to the server. If you can't, oh well, just wait until later when you do get a chance to sync. I can't show you this. If I tilt it, it'll die. But their idea is to have this. You take it. They have a little mount you can put on your snowmobile or ATV, and it's got your speed. It uses GPS speed, and it'll hook into your instruments. To show you oil pressure, things like that. It's pretty neat. Here is where you can add different vehicles. So there's a list. If I pull this over here, these are all the active vehicles that I have in my garage. Now they look a little weird that they're dated, and that's the name, but I did that on purpose. But imagine that's your ATV, 2 of your snowmobiles, 3 of your cars, your lawnmower, your riding lawnmower, and your weed whacker. You can put them in here. You can do maintenance records. You can see where the dealers are around. I can add a maintenance record, services performed. Let's see, I got the oil changed, and I got the tires replaced. Pretty straightforward. Doesn't seem that difficult. And then so there I added the maintenance record. And then at the end, we've got this app settings. The main thing in here, other than some privacy and all that, this offline map manager. So I don't have any maps downloaded, but that map was reading because I have Wi-Fi. If I didn't, that map just would be this big blank space. I can download either in the United States or Alaska, Alabama. That's how I know Alaska doesn't have any maps, it's because it's only 64 megs. That way, when I'm offline, the map would look just like I was when I'm online. That is pretty much the app. It's cool, but it's not it's not very complicated looking. Like I said, one of the harder things, you can go back to my server and name the vehicle the same thing, who wins, what is all that. That's buried down in the app. But other than that, it's relatively straightforward. Some of the specific challenges that I ran into. The first one was pretty lame. They heavily use style comp. Do you guys use style comp? And the default style comp built into Xamarin Studio? Spacing, spaces instead of tabs. After every comma in a parameter list, there needs to be a space. Nobody has that turned on. I never did either. And my first check-in blew up the build. I'm like, really? I added an ID to a freaking control and I blew a build up. What? And I saw this 1,000 style comp errors with my default. So why I bring that up is all of my naming conventions for my tests went out the window because I had to follow theirs. So you'll see some weird looking naming conventions in my code. That's not my fault. I mentioned the hardest thing was no logout. And this is why. Bear with me here. Android is the easiest platform to deal with when it comes to connecting to it and getting your tests up and running. Now, it's not the most stable platform that we're finding, app-wise, but I plug in my phone to my laptop, I run the tests, they run exactly as expected, the way the documentation tells me. The apps get reset every single time. So every test, every NUnit test, every single one of these, and I have 11 of them. I have 11 of those. Every one of those on an Android, the app gets reset like you just loaded it from the store. So my login problem, who cares? The app's blown away every time these tests run. I need to log in every time. Perfect. I'm not keeping any state locally. Brilliant. That's what I want. Then I started writing the iOS tests against my simulator. But luckily I didn't do it for very long because that works exactly the same way. Every one of these tests reinstalls itself on the simulator, like the documentation says it's supposed to. Then I plugged in my iPod Touch to start running the tests on hardware. And I remember I ran the test like, these are gonna run. I only got a couple simple ones. I went and got coffee, came back, every one of them was failed. What? It's because on local hardware, you cannot reset the app. Every one of these tests, none of them reset. So the first time it runs, the next time it runs, it's remembering where you were. So if I logged in and I have tests pre-login, because you don't have to log into the app, you can do minimal things not logged in. But once I logged in, I could never go back to that. So one of the ways I got around that, I'm sorry it's so small, I couldn't zoom it in, but I named my tests alphabetically, AAA, AAB underscore, and then the test names. That way NUnit will run them in alphabetical order the way I want them. So my AAA are my tests to run before login. AAB is another set of tests. Don't log in, but try to go download a map, which you're allowed to do. Then AAC, log in but with bad credentials. Then AAD, log in with good credentials. Once that test runs on iOS, I'm logged in. So the rest of the tests can't try to log in or they fail, because you'll never get to see the login. That makes sense?
Are those credentials saved on device or something?
The app is.
The login credentials?
The app doesn't, there's no, once you're logged into the real Polaris app, there's no way, they chose to do that as a business requirement. Once you're logged in, they don't want you to log out for whatever reason. So like I said, I would have never guessed. If I would have just run in the emulator simulator, luckily the dev team warned me those Scalber maps run like crap on the Android emulator, so don't bother. And right then I'm like, well then I'm gonna go get an iPod Touch and I'll just do all my testing on hardware, big whoop. Luckily I did that earlier, or I would have had run into this late in the game. I'm like, hey, why is this hardware test failing? All the simulator emulator ones run just fine. So if we look at code, remember these first two tests, I'm assuming I'm not logged in, and on Android I'm never logged in first. But this very first one, log in and then go and try to download, I'm doing a compiler directive. If you're running under the Android project, log in. If you're iOS and you got this far, you should already be logged in. Don't try. Right? So there's step one. There's hoop number one I had to run into. And all through every one of my tests, I have to have this stupid compiler. There's it for that one, on and on and on. So if I'm interacting with the UI, I have the compiler directive out here causing a login or not. Any sense? I already mentioned the Scobler map doesn't work on the Android emulator at all, and even on hardware, my phone's a little old, it gets slow. So a lot of the things that I have to do, and we'll see examples of this all over, is I have some pretty elaborate wait mechanisms. So Xamarin gives you a basic command, wait for element, and you give it the element name you're looking for. Hopefully it's an ID. If not, wait for the login button. Don't go past this. Wait for the default 15 seconds and move on. Well, I've had to build some things, especially it was in the list, now make sure it's not type of wait scenario. So that was a little bit of a challenge. On iOS, the very first time you install the app, if it's never been on the device before at all, because it's using the map, it comes up with this app wants to use your location, allow, deny. I still haven't figured out why. And I have shown the dev team, there's nothing plugged in. It's my iPod, I just downloaded it from Hockey App. Something presses that allow button automatically, and I don't know what's doing it. I just can't, I gave up. I said, screw it. So I look for, is there this allow, deny? This is being provided by the operating system, so I think it's called button 2 is allow. I can't do anything about it. I can't set an ID. It's not coming from our app. It's coming from the OS. Sometimes it's there. Most of the time it's not. So I write a little routine that looks for this stupid allow, deny box. See if I can find it. Nah, it's not working. All right.
Can you interact with that box or not?
Yep, it's on the UI.
Okay.
It's on the UI, but our app's not the one doing it. Our app's not throwing this box up. iOS is.
Yeah, that's coming from the
But if it's
iOS,
on the
it's not
screen-
part of the.
Mhm. So if it's on the screen, you can see it and do it. It doesn't
So
matter
you could
where it
actually
came from.
interact with it?
Mhm. Yeah, if you have the REPL running and you shut your app down and go over to the settings screen, you can read the settings screen and start interacting with that. It interacts with it's using the accessibility framework built into the devices. It doesn't care if it's your app running or something else, which is kind of fun sometimes. You can screw with people. All right, in the app, I'll pull it up here on my simulator now. It should be running. Actually, I did this on purpose. I'm going to let this run. I'm going to run the bad credentials. We'll let this run as I talk. So you'll see what it looks like when these run. If I had my iPod actually plugged in, it will always default to hardware. If it doesn't see one, then it'll try to hit the simulator. So even though it's shut the simulator down and is launching it again, the app, I could either tell it, app, stay on the phone and remember where you were or not. There is a setting when you launch the app, documented in Xamarin, saying there's a setting. If you want iOS to remember the app, otherwise don't, but it's ignored on hardware. So there's my bad password. And if you look over, in my unit test, I have a green because I look for that wrong email or password text. Let's log us in. Another platform-specific thing between iOS and Android, iOS actually pulls the keyboard up and interacts with the keyboard. So it's as close as you can get to interacting with the keyboard. Android, it will pull the keyboard up, but you can see it's typing keys here. It actually really is doing that on the device. In Android, it will just fill in your text into the box. It does not actually hit the keyboard. So I guess in a scenario where you might have a custom keyboard and you want to actually test it, you'd probably run into challenges there because Android isn't actually interacting with that soft keyboard that comes up. I haven't run into that yet, but it's something to keep in mind. Now this is an app, a built-in app thing where they're trying to encourage you to go download maps. So that, unless you have a downloaded map, that little message comes up every single time. So programmatically I'm looking, are there buttons? And luckily those are buttons that I was able to add IDs to. Look for button allow, button later, button whatever it's called. I'm looking for those and there's a command in there to say, sit there and wait on the screen until you see this. But if you don't see it within 20 seconds, that's okay too because it means you have a downloaded map. And again, I get my nice green circle on my unit test and I'm in the app where I expect to be. One of the challenges is they have this hamburger menu over here, and this is where your vehicles pile up. Right now I only have one. In order to sync, if I were to go add a vehicle on the website portion of this app, you pull down, and that causes a sync. However, this was a little tricky in that you had to say very smartly, where do I pull? I could just give it coordinates, but that's not going to work on different screen sizes. So how do you grab something that's dynamic, that you don't really know what this is going to be named? On some of my logins, I have 15 or 20 devices, and the menu might be down, how to scroll up. Those are some of the things I had to run into. That was a challenge. When you're in the vehicle, and we added that maintenance record, the way these are set up in iOS, I was able to set IDs on those switches. So I could very easily say, I think I call it SW oil, SW fluids, SW air filter, etc. Dot tap, and it'll act like I'm hitting my button, my finger right there. Okay? On Android, those IDs disappear. I don't know why, they just do. So I came up with a trick. I call it the child, parent, child class technique. What I do is I say, look for an element with the word oil on it, which this does have an ID. I think I call it LBL oil. Go up the hierarchy one level to its parent, then look for a switch type and select it. So that way I can programmatically, because these on Android just look like an array of switches, 1 through however many there are on there. So instead of saying, find switch array number 4, and hope that that's the one I expected, I can actually programmatically say, find carbides, go up a level into the view list, down to the switch. So it's another little trick that I had to come up with on Android.
So there's a parent container that holds both the label and
Yep.
switch, some kind.
Yeah, and I'll pull up the REPL here in a second so we can actually look at somehow what the hierarchy looks like on there, and you'll see how easy and how easy it is to read. And the final thing that I came up with that we're going to look at is I integrated a way to reach out to the back end, add things, then confirm they get synced on the mobile app, and then do the same, remove, see if they're not, make sure they're not on the mobile app anymore. So with that, let's look at some REPL stuff. Let's first look at some commands. In iOS, there's a couple different ways to instantiate. Inside of here, you can either give it your, not bundle ID, but you know what I'm talking about, whatever you signed it as. Or you can actually tell it, there is a compiled app, and I just drop them into the bin folders of these to make it simple. But you can say, hey, take this app and load it on the device, which works just fine with the simulator, and that's what I was talking to Steve about before. That doesn't work on a real device. I wish it did. I hope that's coming. That it works just like the simulator, but it doesn't. Android is a game on. You give it an APK file and tell it it's an emulator running locally, it's hardware, it's already on the device, it's not there, put it on there. Android's simple. Here is an example of the login. Okay. Am I missing it? Oh, duh. It's in my shared. I'm going to go over to my shared code. So I thought I would be able to put this login code into somewhere that worked on both, because the login box that you didn't see, I realize now, or just saw it briefly, we're using Auth0, which is a web-based, it's a web view inside, it's a web view control, and then their Auth0 thing runs, and we didn't have to deal with it. Single sign-on, it works great. So one of the things that you're seeing here is on the app, I'm saying look for a button with an ID, BTN, login, or register. Hope you guys can see that. Okay, so first thing you do, tap on a button called button login or register. Wait for something in the web view with the CSS of that. Well, that's what they called it. I have no control over it. It makes no sense. Sign in easy email. Whatever, I found it. I hit it. I'm waiting for it. And then here are the two text boxes that are in that web view. Add username and password. You can see I had to slip in an Android specific. In certain screen sizes, the keyboard hides the button enough that when I try to click on it, it's not there, even though it's on the screen slightly. Sometimes. So if you're Android, I just tell it scroll down, and then the box will be up high enough, and then just tap on it. So you can see, and then I had to add the iOS specific. This is that allow deny dialog that I told you about that pops up every once in a while. I think it's only when initial install on the app, but the OS calls it button 2. It's close enough to an ID. I hope they never change it because I'll miss it if it's not there. These are what the commands look like. The only difference between this and what's going to be in the REPL is there's semicolons at the end. Otherwise, this is what you would. These are some of the commands that we'll see when we look into the REPL. So this is saying tap a control with specifically an ID of button 2, as opposed to there's a marked command. This is the one where it gets a little more fancy, where you say find something called button, login, or register. First, look for one that's called an ID. If you find it, stop and use that one. Next, try to find text. Find the first control that either has text or there's label fields that might have text in there. I think it looks at label first, then text. Yep.
Have you ran into anything yet with, I think it's with Android Marshmallow, they're going to be doing on every permission that's unique, they're going to give you a prompt like that to allow it versus having you just accept, a big long list of it.
And Android does it when you install the app, right?
And I think that's going to change.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of that yet?
I haven't. No.
Okay. Because I'm wondering if you're going to do something similar for
I'll
that.
have to.
With
Yeah.
this then.
Now, forgive me. Marshmallow's out, right?
I
That's
think
the
it's
latest Android.
6. Yeah.
And my phone, one of my phones has that, and it's not doing that.
Okay.
It's not coming up with the same thing that iOS does. I think it's still when you install.
Okay.
It tells you these are all the things the app wants to do, yeah or no.
Yeah, I thought they were going to do away with that, but maybe not.
I thought that was going to be optional, that after your app is installed, you can optionally request more permissions.
Oh, okay. That might be what it is.
All right, so I wanted to show you, because I'm a little bit proud of it. I talked about where I'm making a call to the back end, manipulating, then I'm reading the app. So I'm gonna go watch the test. So you can see iOS, we're logged in already, we didn't have to log in. So behind the scenes, I'm adding a vehicle, but I'm still having to react to the app, and my unit test failed. Ah, great. All right, here's another thing that I said, Xamarin, what's the deal? I didn't mean to show this, but all right, so I'm getting a could not load file or assembly system.net HTTP at runtime. What I'm going to have to do, and I have no idea why, and Steve, I saw your question on Xamarin's forum about this, and I think I responded to it a few days ago. I'm going to have to go into the project, and I'm going to have to take my reference to system.net HTTP and tell it local. I must have done a clean, and it wiped it out. Move the DLL locally. It doesn't find it for whatever reason. I know you ran into this, I ran into this, and I didn't know why, and I pulled my hair out. So I won't be able to show you the actual test, although there really isn't much to show. But I kind of rambled there a little bit, but it was a runtime error. Like, why is this not working? What do you mean system.net.http isn't there? It's part of .net. What are you doing? Why isn't it there? I have no idea. Steve asked Xamarin. I found his question. I asked, yeah, I'm running into the same thing. It was on Stack Overflow as well. Crickets. And I think I blew a day before I finally just started trying stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm going to drop the DLL into my bin. Screw you, GAC. I'm going to tell you it's right here, and that worked. So then I went and said, all right, copy it local, and that works too. But I don't have it set to copy local all the time, and now it decided to blow up. So it's one of those things like, why? I don't know. Is it worth figuring out or worrying about? No, but it burned a day of my time trying to figure out why. What am I doing wrong when there's really something in. And if you look at the stack trace as you go, I mean, this is getting down into the model runtime is where the exception's getting thrown, so who knows. And this is the latest Xamarin, so whatever it was, they didn't fix it over the last.
Is that on iOS or Android?
iOS.
Okay.
It's just that simply?
Yep.
Huh.
And it's on the simulator only?
Nope.
Okay.
Both simulator and hardware. And literally here, all I'd have to do.
I'd be curious to what your build options are in iOS.
I would do that and it would work. All right.
What's your your build action on that item?
It's just a reference. It's no different than the other references I have. So
Okay.
why it shouldn't be any different.
Cool.
Let's do a REPL. Is there anything specific you'd want to see? I was going to pull up the REPL window and show you hierarchy. There's a simple hierarchy and then the full-on hierarchy. Is that good? You want to see that? All right. So you can put this REPL. It's tied to this app object that gets instantiated. It gets sent. Here's my platform-specific UI driver code. And then again, out here are the unit tests kind of driving the overall flow. So I'll put it. How about we do the vehicle? That's it. So you run it and move vehicle group in. So we'll wait for that. Do you want to download an offline map? And then the REPL window should come up. So I'm going to say later, and here comes my REPL window. Anybody remember how to make this bigger?
Control plus.
Command
Command
plus.
plus.
There we go. Okay, so the first command that you'll learn is called tree. And this is kind of a summarized list of the UI. So it gives you a good idea of what it's finding on there. And sometimes the ordering on the screen makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. I'll try to make this a little bit so you can still see the app behind. All right, let's go to the screen that's more interesting. So this has a list, it has a couple of buttons on it. So when we look at this one, we see we've got my tabs at the bottom, map, rides. iOS makes it really nice. Not only on iOS you get the words on the tabs, which Android doesn't do by default, but you can see, I'm using the idea of the image, but here's my, where I'm setting IDs programmatically. So in iOS, I can say, go to map, and I know that it's going to go to the map no matter what, whether map's in Spanish, whether it moves around, I can call it, it's pretty simple. And if we go back to where I'm going in my iOS specific code, I have a little method that says map screen, tap the thing called map, you're on the map screen. That's how hard it is in Android, in iOS. Android, the same exact method, does something like this. So, look for a control class, scrolling tab container view, find the 0 indexed child, which should be the one all the way on the left, hopefully is the map, and select it. So there's an example where I set an ID in Xamarin.Forms on the tabs. It comes through in iOS just fine, and in Android it didn't. And I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. Xamarin was no help, so I had to do something like that. So again, anything in this file are things that I couldn't get to work cross-platform the exact same way. So you can see, I was very shocked that I ended up with this much platform specific. Now, luckily a lot of it is reusable. So you can see on Android, I do set an ID, text waypoint name in a box. That comes through just fine. So on Android, I can, this is the same line as what would be in the iOS one, but I have that stupid, now go to a different tab. So I had to have it specific in Android.
So you've got an Android UITest, an iOS, and a shared file?
So I have in my Android unit test project, I have an iOS unit test project. In those unit test projects, that's where I have my UI specific driving code, the REPL commands that I need to run for the different platforms. But the unit tests themselves, the ones with the test bracket, those are in a common file. So I had to always say, to log in on the app, it's always these 4 steps. To get to a maintenance record and add one, it's do this, do this, do this. On both platforms, it's the same, but how you get there and how you interact with the actual controls are different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So move to menu tab number 3. On Android, I have to say index 2, 0 index, so it's 2. Move to that tab, or in iOS, I just say move to maintenance.
Yeah.
Anything that I thought I could share, I put in this shared code. You can see I don't have a lot.
Sure.
I have a common wait command, because wait is wait on both commands. I have one where I can pass in the seconds just to make it a little easier. Instead of having to do this every time I want to say wait for X number of seconds, I just say wait, name I'm looking for 30 for 30 seconds. And then I thought I could get away with the login. Now, a lot of times the tree isn't enough though. So I've got my hamburger menu, so I should be able to say app.tap and I open up my menu. Now in all the tutorials and all the examples and the rainbow and the unicorn type examples I see on Xamarin, that's how easy it is. Look at how simple, look at how easy that is. It's so easy. You know, put a credit card number in and make sure it's 16 digits. Look at how simple this is. Except when you want to do it on both platforms and you want to run on hardware locally and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The other major command that you'll start getting used to is you just do a query with nothing. This is the true full, whatever the DOM, whatever they call it. This is the true everything that went out onto the screen, starting right there. So there are, in it, what it thinks, there are 28 things on the screen. A lot of them are these garbage, just OS-specific frames and setting up views. And then you start looking, and as you scroll down, you'll start seeing, here's some Xamarin.Forms specific things. And eventually we should start finding this add vehicle button. A lot of times I just have to find it. And there's the button add vehicle. So because there's an ID, I can do the REPL command. Oops. No, I made it die. I would have been able to do app.tap, button add vehicle, and away I went. Now what used to work is if I just stopped this and restarted it and left the REPL window open, I'd be able to reconnect to it, and that seems to have broken either in this latest or I think it was the one before this. It was fun because I would just leave a REPL open all day long. No matter what app was running on the phone at the time, whether it was iOS or Android, I'd just say, hey, what's on the screen now? Now if you stop the test, the REPL window can stay open, but you'll get errors when you try to do anything. So I don't know if that's the way it was supposed to work to begin with, and I just got lucky for a while. All right, what else should I show? Anything specific that I've gone through too quickly that you want to see? If not, I'll kind of wrap up.
So for your project structure, you're not doing this inside your same solution as your project. You have a separate solution that you're doing this.
Yes, and that's one of my recommendations I'm going to bring up here in a second. I've got some tips of, I've tried this and it didn't work so well. I think that's my very first one. I tried having these alongside all the other unit tests that the actual app had. And what it does is it messes up this unit test window over here, depending on how you're running it. It'll lose track of what's run and what hasn't. It's just not worth it. Just have it in its own. In source control, I've got everything in the same spot as the app. When you get from our repository, you get these two. You just have to open a separate solution.
And what about with the preview for Windows 10 Universal? Are they going to? Do you know anything about? Are they adding this to that as well?
Officially, you cannot do UI testing against Windows with this. Even though Windows has the most robust automation built in, Xamarin doesn't have it yet. And have you seen anything? Have heard rumors that they're going to be adding it? I just assumed they can add it whenever they want. They just haven't bothered because no one's asking for it. I don't know why they wouldn't be able to do it. Like I said, from what I've read, the automation in Windows Phone is better than either platform. That has an actual, if you do a search for automation ID, you'll get how to do it on Windows Phone. That's a real control, something on the controls in Windows you can set. And I'm assuming they just inherited from what they used to do in Windows Forms, ASP.NET. There was always an ID. I never ran into a spot where I couldn't set the ID and it didn't get set. But as of now, I have seen where they still say this does not work on Windows Phone. So, oops. So for my my tips,
Yeah,
I'm gonna give you all seizures.
it's part of the brainwashing.
Should I just stop?
Yeah, just give me a second here.
That's the name of this PowerPoint effect. I want to try.
Not sure what's going on there. Let me flip back and forth here for a second.
Our developers want to do any of this, but our QA people don't know how yet. Hire me to come in and I'll get you off the ground. That's what I was doing with Polaris, and they just love me so much they're going to hang on to me for a while. Is it good?
Try it again.
So one of the things I'm doing, I'm trying to come in, I've got some sample projects, I've got a kind of a shell. So give me your APK file. You can take any APK file on the Apple Play Store, grab it, and write tests against it. No one can stop you. Android's that wide open. Is it better if I just stay there, Steve?
Yeah, just go there and
That's a great way to get started. If you want to impress a client, do that with their APK, their app out in the store. With the developers, you can pull off the APK files off your phone even, so it's not hard at all. I did that with Lifetime Fitness and kind of wowed them. Like, we walked in, we were pitching to do a project, and so, by the way, I'm going to write tests like this. Here's some examples. And they were like, how did you do that? You don't have access to our source code. And magic. Android's the easiest to get going on. What I would recommend as developers is there's probably a spot you have to get into in your app all the time, and it's a pain. You have to log in, create this record, go here, go there, go 3 levels deep, da-da-da. That's why I got into this, is I'm sick of doing that. So I'm gonna hit a button, get coffee, come back, and my app will be right where I want to be to see if the change I just made worked. That's a great way. The idea though, there's a lot of QA people out there now that are becoming more developers than not. They're very familiar with Selenium. They're very familiar with the Visual Studio UI testing. Keep that in mind as you're building this. I feel dirty with the code I've written. There's all kinds of enhancements I want to make. I want to go refactor and just make it simpler, and I'm duplicating code here and there, and I could simplify it and use generics all over, and it'll be magical. But when I hand it off to QA, they're not going to understand it. They're not going to be able to maintain it. So treat this code like you're going to be handing it off to your most junior developers on your team. Keep that in mind. So it's okay to feel dirty. It's okay to duplicate code. It's okay to have compiler directives sneak into spots you don't really want them to be. If people can understand what you're doing, a QA person, that's your goal, is my philosophy. There's my REPL window. Just like real development, run on hardware all the time. I will probably not trust the emulators and simulators anymore based on what I ran into that login thing. I would have been screwed. If I would have waited till now to start running on hardware, I would have been pulling my hair out. What is going on? Why is this not working? Hardening is the hardest part. To me, it's the funnest. So getting a test to run is great. Getting a test to be intelligent enough to sit and wait because you've got enough vehicles in your garage that the sync, instead of taking 10 seconds like it does on a fresh install, it might take 35. And intelligently knowing when it's done, so you know that it's timing out for real. You can't see the spinny anymore. Those are the things that make this fun as a developer to me, is figuring out all those little nuances. So I want this truly to be part of the CI process. I can't have false negative tests all the time. People are going to lose faith in my tests. So they have to be smart enough to know it's just because this test user has too many things and it's going to take longer. Hardening the test is what takes the longest. The way to get started, like I said, is just create a simple, take your app today, if you target Android, write a test that logs you in. It's super easy. Go into Xamarin, create new UI test project, take your APK file, drop it into your bin, tell it the name, do app.REPL, boom. You'll get the REPL window, and you'll be able to start inspecting into your app. The one thing to keep in mind for both iOS and Android, the first time you're loading the app, if it's loading it, it takes forever. It could take 10 minutes sometimes. Your machine will start spinning up and getting hot sometimes. Just let it go. That's just something that I thought I was doing something wrong. I figured I would mention it. You're not doing anything wrong. It just sometimes takes forever. I already mentioned about the separate solution, and mainly because of the unit tests get messed up. Make sure you're doing correct weighting for elements. What works really slick on your really nice brand new iPhone when your audience is using the version before and it might take a few more seconds to render something, keep that in mind. There is one thing I want to show you. I'll just explain it. Adding something to a list, verifying that it's there, then through the back end, removing it from a list, and then saying, all right, UI test, I want to see if the element's there. What I do is I put it in a try-catch block, and I say app.waitForElement, 15 seconds, wait for this element. I don't want you to find it, but I'm going to give you 15 seconds to make sure it's really not there. the list could be off the screen, so scroll up and down and try to find it. If you don't find it, and you throw the exception that you've timed out because you can't find the element, that's in your catch, return your true to your assert. Does that make sense? That was the only way I could figure out to say, it was in the list, it shouldn't be there now, verify that it's not there, and the list could be hundreds of elements long.
Have you tried WebView?
Mhm.
Does it work with the WebView, HTML elements and
The
others?
the login is using Auth0, which is a web view, and it's an online, we window into their website and log in. So it's a single sign-on that we use for Polaris.
Okay.
And I'm
But
inspecting-
How about the different views on the web, div or anything?
Yep, here's an example.
You could,
It was back in that,
you could actually test the phone gap app in that case?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, so I've written real tests against a Appcelerator Titanium app,
Okay.
Xamarin.Forms, native Android, and the Forms thing that I'm doing now. Here's an example. I'm looking at the web view for that Auth0, and this is the kind of thing, you're looking at a DOM object in a web browser, and you have to find out, I promised you that I would give you something that made all of this time you spent, the last hour, right there. And I just went out right before this and tried to find, I don't know where I found this. I pulled my hair out. How do you know what these are called in the REPL window? All you get is a web view. I want to say, get me all the things inside the web view. I know I can access them once I know the names, but how do I know the names? I don't know what they are. I can't see them. You do whatever your web view name is, whatever the container is for web view, .css with a star. That took forever. And again, I don't know where I found it. I did, and I figured I would pass that on because that would be hard to figure out because it's just not out there very easy to find.
So Frank,
Yeah.
a possibly stupid question here then. So how do you know that you have a web view that you can interrogate? Is every DOM also a web view
No.
interrogatable?
In our app, in the Polaris app, when you log in, it's a web view. I just know that.
Okay.
That's how we do single sign-on.
Some screens won't have a web view.
None of them do except for the login.
Okay.
That's just the single sign-on solution that the dev team chose a long time ago.
Back one more question. How about the OS version? How do you handle those? Like iOS 6, 7, or whatever?
Yep. On Emulator Simulator, when you're launching the app, there are commands to say, I want to use this specific simulator, iOS simulator that I have on mine. So iPhone 6, iOS 8.1. Android, you can get a list of, these are all my identified emulators that I have, or it's whatever your device plugged in is. Now, I didn't even talk about Xamarin Test Cloud, because theoretically, if you're running it locally on hardware, the exact same tests will run up on the cloud the way you would expect them to. So other than the reset function on hardware on the test cloud, that's where it works. So I could tell it, iOS, every time you're launching, for every one of those test methods, reinitialize yourself. Pretend I've never logged in before, and it would work just like Android.
But not locally on your hardware.
So what are they doing?
This, I cannot tell it, app, make me log in every time.
Yeah.
Now, if the app had a logout function, I would do that, but I'm not going to make the development team build me a logout when the real app doesn't want it.
So how does Test Cloud get that to work, or you just don't know?
Well, they must have it, they figured out a way to do it.
Okay.
From what I've heard from the people that I talked to on Test Cloud, they built a way to very quickly image the devices. So when you're done, they wipe the OS and they factory reset the phone.
Okay.
That's probably why. It's because every time it's running, they're running that factory reset. If I did that, it would work, but I don't want to do that every time.
Also, you said you wrote tests for a Titanium app. You can't run those on Test Cloud, though, can you? Or does Test Cloud only allow?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Okay.
So Android, you need nothing special. You can literally grab an APK file out of the store and run it. You don't need the source code or anything. The iOS version, you need the Calabash DLL installed in the Xamarin app.
Yeah.
I asked, hey, how would I, because they claim you can test other frameworks. It's a native app, but you can test it. There are libraries you can install for Accelerator Titanium, supposedly, that are the Calabash libraries that would allow this to work.
Okay.
I never tried it. The client didn't ask me to do it, or they wouldn't pay me to do it, so I wouldn't do it. So I didn't try it. It's a pretty long list of all kinds of open source libraries you need to install, but supposedly it works.
Okay.
The difference is there's in Android it installs a separate little server that runs alongside your app that's interacting with that accessibility, and in iOS it needs to be built into the app.
Yep.
That's why Android, they can just do whatever they want, because they can install anything they want side by side.
I thought they even blocked the non-Xamarin apps on Test Cloud, even for Android.
They may now.
Okay.
I didn't try it. I didn't look into it.
I didn't try it either. I thought I saw it in the documentation though that they don't allow it, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else is.
I saw in documentation where they still said you can test any native app you want,
Okay.
but they didn't say specifically in Test Cloud or not.
Oh, okay.
So maybe there's the fine print. I know UITest will hit it.
Okay.
Okay. Questions? See if I had anything interesting on this last slide. Oh, my wish list. The number one would be no extra things for iOS. Don't make me put a Calabash blah blah in your thing. Let me work just like Android. That would be awesome. Hey, Xamarin.Forms, if I set an ID, set the ID and send it through to the UI. Give me a way to automatically install the app in my continuous integration process would be awesome. And I'd love a way to programmatically say, okay, halfway through my app, go into airplane mode. Programmatically. I haven't figured out a way to do that, or I haven't even seen that you can do that yet. I haven't really looked into it. I'm assuming you can. Just based on other things I've run into, especially on iOS, they have it pretty locked down. So that would be my wish list. If you could give me those things, that would have saved me a lot of time.
I think you need a robot hand.
Well, I didn't want to tell. I forgot his name last time. Where he said where he said his game, he found somebody had built a little hand that ran the game. Like, you don't need to do that. I can run tests against your game. I did grab it, and he does, like every 20 minutes, there's that little, you have to pick 4 pictures, kind of like a CAPTCHA, to prevent it, but I could still have it running until it saw that, and then tell me I need to go do something manually.
Oh.
I didn't want to break his heart. All right, questions, anything else?
How would Recorder change the way you run your business? I mean, or your work? Would it simplify things quite a bit, or would you still find yourself going in and hunting and snooping all,
Based on what, I did some real projects. One was at the Secretary of State when the UI test first came out, and what do they call it? Visual Studio UI test, I think is what it's called. You could code, it was just like this, look for an ID on the web page, find it, click it, add text and all that. You could record, but then we always had to go in and harden it. We always had to go in and, so the recorder might get you to start, but I hope I didn't show it that much, but once you get the hang of the REPL, I can move through the app, this app especially because I know it so well, I can move through it almost as fast as I can tap on the screen.
So you probably would.
App.tab, button login, app.tab, or app.intertext, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it wouldn't help me much because I know how to do it so quickly, and I think it's easy enough to learn that that's what's going to happen mostly. That's why the recorder is like, I saw it, I'm kind of like,
There's also a command in the REPL window to copy all your commands to your clipboard, essentially paste it into a text. So it's like a recorder almost.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if that's similar to what they've done.
It is, and if you go play with the Xcode version, that's exactly what it's doing. In fact, you've got Xcode open over here, and it's entering lines of code as you go, is exactly what it's doing. But it's going to have the same issues. You saw my vehicle list had dates for the names down to the second. Well, that's how I say, okay, remember, date time now, name the vehicle that, add it, now look in the list for that date. That's the trick I do to say dynamically add stuff and make sure it's getting added. That's going to be hard to record. You're going to be programming anyway, so you might as well just do it all programmatically. I'm not saying the recorder's stupid. I've used them before. I guess I have never used them before because they didn't really get me much.
It's probably good to get people started.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it gives you a false sense. Like, if you really, and I don't think the QA person would be nefarious in doing this, but they're like, hey, look at all the tests we have. And they last 3 weeks as development's changing things on purpose. And all of a sudden you hit the test and none of them run. Now your managers are saying, what happened? What, is it really that bad? What just blew up? And then, well, if they're that fragile, why we pay money to do it? You know what I mean? That's why what I'm trying my hardest is to make sure this thing runs no matter what gets thrown at it. When it fails, it's truly a failure. There's something wrong with the app. Because I want to get it into the CI process, just like unit tests. Remember the first unit tests we all wrote? I remember mine. They weren't unit tests. They were integration tests. They were doing 18 different things and testing databases, and they weren't unit tests. And these are closer to that than not. Like I said, my dream is to create my own little test cloud in our CI process with a Mac Mini sitting there and a hub with like 5 different kinds of phones. Mm-hmm. Every time someone kicks a build off, these tests run alongside our unit tests. The other thing too that you can do locally and in the test cloud, you can tell it at certain points, take screenshots, and it writes image files of the screen as you go. That's kind of nice. Lifetime Fitness is starting to get into this, and that's what they want their QA team to do. Kick off the tests, but then they manually go. They take a screenshot on every single screen. Then their QA process is to go through those screenshots and verify. So they're not doing any inserting. If the test runs to the end, great. Then they go through and manually look at all the screenshots and make sure it's what they expected. That's one way to do it.
They could even run those images through like an image diffing program to see how they change between the different runs.
Yeah, or they just move most of their stuff to India, so you
Sure.
have them do it for $20 an hour.
You could put it on what is it, Mechanical Turk? You know what that is?
Yeah. Have you tried to upload any apps on iOS that use, or no, on Android that use Google Maps API to test cloud? Because that breaks actually.
Yeah, I know that it's not easy to
Have
test.
you found a way
maps.
to solve that? Well, no, actually it just breaks the map completely because they re-sign your app.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that happens locally too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you found a?
No.
Okay.
That's why I don't, like I said, in our app, mainly because I don't know what I would be trying to test on the map. It's kind of like, the map's going to be one of those things we got to manually, our Esri team is testing the maps manually anyway, that's their job.
Okay.
So luckily
Well, Scholar actually run the test, I noticed that.
yeah, it does. It's slow,
Right.
super slow. I can't zoom in and out. There's a way to add waypoints just by holding your finger on it. In the test, they sort of work, but it's never where I tell it to put it. It's 300 miles that way. I'm like, what's good? So I gave up, and they're okay with that. It's mainly, I found some things with performance, which I'm happy that I found those now. At least we know, like, there won't be anybody with 100 vehicles in the garage yet, but down the road, we should fix our syncing to handle it. That made me happy, that I found something that we're gonna have to fix 6 months from now. It's, don't hold up the release, but heads up, that's gonna be a performance issue later. That's probably the best thing I've found that made me feel good. And then I've found all kinds of like buttons that aren't where they should be, and in this Android phone, one of our tabs disappears every once in a while when I scroll. In certain Android versions, found that. I don't know how, if and when anyone would have noticed that that's happening. Mine did. My tests do. So I found some things where I'm happy, like, and I know they're happy. We found it, let's fix it, or at least be acknowledging that they're there, and let the business people say yay or nay, that's good enough to go, or dev team fix that.
But as far as like look, feel, the performance of the map, that's still manual.
It's manual.
Wow.
Yeah. An embarrassing one was, for some reason, the iOS tab bar turned pink. It's transparent, and somehow an image got put behind it. Well, mine, they were kind of expecting my thing to catch that, and I had to explain that Wow,
Yeah.
it's colorblind, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the reason this is fun to me is there's really nobody yet out there with the book on how to do it, the way to do it. It's kind of, every app's going to be different. You know, the next app I do won't have these same problems. It'll have some new ones that I would never be able to guess till you get into it. So that's fun. As a developer, that's what makes it fun. Once I'm to this point now, I'm just kind of, okay, they added 3 more buttons, let's click them. That gets a little boring, but eventually I'll be handing this off to the QA team.
So are you capturing your knowledge in any way? Are you blogging? Are you writing a book?
Not writing a book. No, because I want people to hire me.
Okay.
Yes, I've been told you don't have a single post on LinkedIn. You should do one. So I'm going to start writing some white papers.
Sure.
Just simple stuff. This kind of thing, like here's some freebies.
Yeah.
Here's how to query the web view and get everything. I don't know where you're supposed to find this out, but here,
Yep.
you're welcome. I'll do that.
Yeah.
Just
Just
look
throw
at
it
your
in.
blog, not to LinkedIn.
I'll do it in both.
Okay.
Right now my webpage still has my personal stuff on it, so I wasn't expecting to get hired at Polaris so quickly. I thought I'd have a couple weeks to kind of get going, and then luckily I'm happy. All right, that's all I got. So thank you very much. I hope this was.
Yeah, great. Thank you.